representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a ZOR, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Your host, Erik Van Horn, here today with Erik Schechterman and Shirley Kefgen. Now, we got two guests. They're competitors, fierce competitors that are also very good friends. So Erik's the Chief Development Officer at Benetrends Financial. He's been a featured speaker on numerous business and franchise conferences, educating entrepreneurs on successful business funding strategies. He's written several articles on small business topics for Franchising World magazine, and he's sought after for his knowledge on a variety of business subjects. And then you got Shirley. She's the Director of Development at FranFund. Shirley, we need to work on probably upping your title a little bit. I'll talk to Jeff and Shirley about that.
Work. Keep me where I am. I'm good.
All right. So Erik, we need to talk about getting you a different title. We'll do that later. Shirley, originally from Michigan, lived in Arizona for the last 14 years, spent her entire life in the career of the franchising space, and devoted the last 22 years to helping folks become business owners in one way or another. She's focused her efforts over the last 9+ years on assisting her clients in identifying, executing strong funding strategies for business startup and ongoing growth. So here's the deal. Both of these two are good friends of mine. And in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, there's so much discussion that happens on lending. And these two are my go-to experts for lending. So I thought, why don't we just record a podcast on this topic, have a bunch of really good information, and a whole lot of fun. So you two up for that?
I'm game.
I make no promises, but I'll give my best shot.
All right. So we're going to have some fun with this. So we're going to have one of you kind of explain the program, talk about the advantages, and then we'll have the other one come in and talk about the disadvantages. And if somebody missed something, make sure you call them out on that, or I'll have to call you out on that, or I'll call you out on not calling them out on it. So let's start with SBA loans. Shirley, can you explain SBA loans? And then can you talk about the advantages? And then Erik, you'll be up with all of the disadvantages of SBA loans.
So an SBA loan is not a loan that is written by or given by the federal government, the Small Business Administration. It's a loan that comes from banks and lending institutions. You, as the borrower, provide a personal guarantee. So even though it's a business loan, there is personal obligation and personal responsibility to pay it back. After you sign your personal guarantee, the government, the Small Business Administration, then will sign a secondary guarantee. And that guarantee will essentially state that no matter what happens with the business, it's going to be your personal responsibility to make the payments. If you cannot, the government then will step in and reimburse the bank for a large chunk. So the reason that when you hear people talk about small business loans, they're almost exclusively talking about SBA loans is that banks have become really dependent on that guarantee. So, I think in general, an advantage is it makes loans available for brand new startup businesses, franchise or otherwise, where without that government guarantee, banks have a really difficult time moving forward in a startup environment in a lot of situations. So in addition to the personal guarantee, oftentimes you're using a personal asset like real estate or maybe life insurance or maybe an investment portfolio. But, there's going to be, in a lot of cases, a personal asset that is attached to this loan as well. So I think sometimes a misconception is that maybe they're, risk-free for the borrower, and that's absolutely not the case with these loans. They do require that you're putting cash into the business, right? So on.
Wait a second. Are you starting to give some of Erik's disadvantages? Like you actually have to put cash into the business on an SBA loan?
I was thinking that was just a reality of the loan, but that could be a disadvantage. We can call it that.
No, keep going. Keep going. You're doing an amazing job at this, by the way. I hope I didn't stop your flow.
No, I may have talked about SBA loans a time or two before. But there's some cash that has to go in. So Erik can talk about why that's no fun in just a minute here. In addition to that, we have to demonstrate the ability to cover the debt. So, these are not just loans that the government writes so that everyone who has ever thought they might want to be a business owner can get access to money. There's still qualifications that have to be met and, bank underwriting standards that are in place there, even though these banks have the government behind them. So the advantage is that they're there, that they make startup lending available. Erik, you can kick off why they're maybe not so fun.
Oh, I can't wait for this. No, no. I mean, listen. I mean, it's funny. What Shirley covered, one, is 100% accurate, and two, what's great about them is almost what is bad about them, or can be flipped. Is yes, these are banks that are making these decisions. The SBA is not a blanket approval for every bank to say yes to every small business idea, to every loan package possible. These are banks that are making decisions, and banks are very siloed. I always like to joke around. Banks have different appetites. Some like chocolate, some like vanilla. And I'm sure Shirley can attest to this. If anyone's ever had like a Microsoft Excel file up in front of them and you put filters at the top and you start filtering it out, it limits your results so you can see exactly what you're looking for. I feel like that's what the lending world has become. I mean, we have banks that literally say, I'm looking for concepts that have more than 50 locations open in the fitness space where the investment is $250,000 to $350,000, and most of it is equipment for up to this much money. And if it's not in those little filters, I can't send them a loan. And some have a larger appetite, some have a smaller. So matching that, and it's a constantly changing appetite. So you have that. And I would say probably the biggest perceived disadvantage that we're dealing with mostly is rates for an SBA loan are always tied to the federal prime interest rate. The federal prime interest rate is a constantly moving number. It's not fixed. Therefore, SBA loans are not fixed rate loans. So the way it works is typically the lenders are allowed to charge a maximum of prime plus 2.75%. Well, for the last few years, since COVID hit and prime was 3.25%, people are like, man, this is amazing. Now that prime is going up and they're going to start looking at rates that are a little bit higher, people are starting to look at the fact that, one, they're not fixed rate loans, and two, the interest rate on these loans are likely going to be higher than leveraging some other assets. Now, all that being said, not to go back on the positive side, I just want to remind people, over the last 10 years, prime has typically been more around the 5 range. What we've been dealing with in the low 3s has only really been 2 times, as far as I could see: the housing crisis of 08 and 09 and COVID. So this has been the exception, not the rule. And I think sometimes just that perception when people say prime's going up, I'm like, no, it's not. Prime's usually going to be where it is right now. You're just getting a discount. It's just a little bit less right now. So, they're not fixed. They're not easy. The S in SBA does not stand for speed. I've obviously delivered that line a few times. And I really it's funny, for as much as, and Shirley knows this, as much as I love to just throw dirt on SBA when I can, we love it. We all do it with our businesses. We have a great process. I think it's more of what we deal with is there's really not problems with the program. There's really not negatives with the program. There's too many inaccurate perceptions in the public of what the program is that create the lovely phone calls that Shirley and I take on a week-to-week basis of, why is this taking so long? I just looked, they just, submitted their loan package 30 days ago. Like it's actually completely normal. A client's going to have to do business plan, projections, tax returns. Yeah, it takes work. It's work to get an SBA loan. I mean, though, it's like I said, to really wrap up the negatives, after everything I just said to rain on them, there's really not a lot of negatives to the program. The negatives are what the perceptions are that an SBA loan is. Yeah, I'm just going to go put 10% down, fill out a one-page application, and they're going to fund my business no matter what it is. And it's just not the case. Oh, and Shirley touched on this. The guarantee, just for everyone listening again, is for the bank. It's not for you, the borrower. I love, I'm sure, Shirley, you get this, the phone call. Well, why wouldn't I do the SBA loan? The bank's guaranteeing it for me. Like, no. That has nothing to do with you. The bank's getting saved, not you. So I'll hit the pause button there because you guys know I'll just keep going.
Shirley, any comments? After we kind of do the first advantages, disadvantages, positive, negatives, we can just have just good discussion. So Shirley, anything else that you'd want to add to the SBA discussion?
I think that the best thing to do with an SBA loan is not think that you're going to design your own loan. Because I think people maybe get a little bit used to that with mortgages, or, they can go to a couple different credit unions and maybe get some different terms for a personal loan. If you do not have that expectation when you start to look at an SBA loan, you'll probably find yourself less disappointed as you get through the process. Because, to Erik's point, they're pretty standard, and banks create boxes, right? They want to make their lives easier. They want to make their underwriting processes easier. So, coming into it with the understanding that you will be offered what a bank is willing to do versus it's up to you to create the program you think you would want. I think that just saves a little heartburn, as folks go through the process.
So if you hear somebody coming to you and they said, the SBA said this, and you're just like, oh my gosh, the SBA didn't say that, the bank did, like, who said that? So what are some of the things that you hear, like, the SBA said this, or go ahead.
I think a lot of times it's easier for a bank, like a local bank that you walk into, it's a lot easier for them to say no because the SBA said no than for them to say no because they don't like the business model, or they don't write loans under $350,000, or they will only move forward if you have a personal asset for collateral. So I think a lot of times that's what ends up happening. It's easier for them to say, oh no, we can't do it, it's an SBA rule, than to say, oh no, we could do it, but we won't. I think that's where a lot of the disconnect comes in.
It's a great area. It's such a great question, Erik, because I mean, listen, I'll even say it at Benetrends. When Benetrends says we cannot get your loan approved, in subtitles, it should say, I couldn't find a lender to do this. Now, fortunately, in what Shirley and our businesses do, our job is to have a large inventory of lenders, so we don't have to deliver that or have options after that point. But the SBA doesn't make these blanket statements like, I mean, in 2020, I heard SBA is not doing fitness or food. No, they didn't just come out and make a statement against all categories of small business. And on the flip side, because we know some places that will go out and say, oh, you should work with our group or our team. We have an SBA program specific to us. Now, maybe it's possible. I don't know that in the world we live in today that the government is taking some of their spare time with nothing else going on in the world and building specific lending programs for specific lending institutions like a funding source or a funding provider. There's no such thing as a government-wide program made for one company. It just doesn't work that way. So definitely be careful of the messaging and the marketing of what's out there. But no, the SBA does not make blanket statements. They set, and what's funny is, and Shirley, maybe you can chime in here, standard operating procedures. They're not called required operating procedures. These are still banks. So yes, the standard is that you could do 10% down for an SBA loan, but in most loan sizes, that's never going to happen. You could do a loan without collateral, but most times they're going to do a loan with collateral. So it's just always important to understand what's the reality out there.
Shirley?
Yes.
Anything else to add? Or are we going to wrap up SBA?
I think the only other thing I'll add, because we both mentioned it a couple times, is 10% cash injection, but what's reality? And the reason that 10% is often not reality is order of operations. So if we just talked about a brick and mortar business, I'm going to go open a martial arts studio, right? Who knows? But before a bank will hand me any money, I have to be ready to start the construction and build out inside of my location. So I have to use my money to pay my franchise fee and pay my attorney to negotiate my lease and cover my first and last month's rent, get my architecture plans drawn up. It's highly unlikely that 10% is going to get me there. It's just not realistic. And so I think, again, that's where detail helps and context matters. Because sure, you might prefer to see a 10% cash injection, but if it was never going to be real anyway, don't get mad about 20%, right? So, but again, just because I know that we've both mentioned that specific point a couple times, I just wanted to explain the why behind it very likely being more than 10%.
Well, that, and I always laugh at the fact that it really doesn't change much, because most of the lenders that will go down to 10% want to see more liquid left over for the borrower. And the ones that take 20% will have a smaller requirement of what liquid's left over. So it's almost like saying, listen, you need 100 grand in liquid. You're either going to put down 10,000 and have 90 left over. You're going to put down 20,000 and have 80. Like either way, you need X amount of liquid, whether it's down and left over or vice versa. I think too many people overcomplicate that, and just, I think there's some just simple math of here's how much liquid you need for an SBA loan.
All right, let's switch gears to the ROBS product. Erik, why don't you take that, explain it, give the advantages, none of the disadvantages, only the advantages. Save all those disadvantages for Shirley to come up with.
Well, the advantages are it's cool to use a program that the IRS literally made up a name where the acronym spells ROBS. I mean, who doesn't love that? And by the way, they literally claim they did not plan that. That was a pure happenstance. So ROB stands for Rollovers as Business Startups. Hopefully most people that are listening are familiar at this stage that now for over 40 years, people have been able to access retirement funds that are no longer with a current employer, most likely, or not in any type of limiting type retirement plan, qualified funds that you can use without incurring any tax or penalty to fund a business. Advantages, I mean, my easiest one, I've always said, let's take all the other crazy things out of it. You're creating liquid. It's pre-tax liquid. So I always like to joke around with people. Do you want, hey, for your liquid, do you want to use pre-tax liquid or post-tax liquid? Pre-tax. Okay, so we're going to leave your checking account untouched and we're going to use a rollover, because you really are creating pre-tax liquid. You're putting retirement funds in investing into your own company, and through that investment structure, that corporation is creating the funds to operate the business. And those funds can be used for any legitimate business expense, working capital, franchise fees, salaries for your employees, salaries for yourself at different stages. It can be used as the equity injection funds needed for SBA loans. It can be combined with other forms of lending. You're starting your business, if you were to just go the ROBS route, debt-free. The timeline to get funding, typically 15 to 20 business days, depending on where your funds are currently. You can pay it back over time. There's no required payback. There's awesome exit strategies down the road to even minimize capital gains tax as your business grows. So I think when people get over the paradigm shift that they usually have to go through when looking at retirement funds, if you really put the benefits of all the different lending programs on paper without the names of the programs and what asset they're using, my bet is a ROBS beats almost any other option every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But it's not perfect, which I'm sure Shirley's going to take over for me here. And it's something that goes against every emotional and logical thought we've pretty much been told since we took our first job in corporate. As I'm sure you've seen, Erik, most people buy businesses. And when they buy those businesses, what's the most common answer? I never would have looked at this business on my own. I never would have thought I would have bought this business. I bet anyone that's ever used a ROBS every one of them said I would never use retirement funds to fund a business because they didn't know that it existed, how it works, what the nuances are. And when people realize, if you've worked a lot of your time in corporate America and you've had a retirement plan and you've used any of your retirement funds to invest in the employers that you're working for and their stock, you've already done rollover funding. But instead of funding somebody else's business, you're funding your own. So that's my take.
That was good. That was really good. All right, Shirley, are there any disadvantages to the ROBS program?
I mean, I don't know that there are true disadvantages.
Wait a second. Wait. I love how both of you are like this. When we get to the disadvantages, you're like, well, it's all advantages. It's not really disadvantage. No, I'm teasing you. Why I'm saying that is because earlier you were mentioning something with the SBA, people talking about maybe having some special programs or whatnot. And you mentioned, Erik, like these lenders are marketers. Like there's a marketing side to a lending business, and you create products, you create things that help you get more business. So what we're doing here is hopefully dispelling some of those things that are myths or marketing tactics that other people may be using, so we can have real clear information here that you can take to the bank. So Shirley, keep going down the same vein that you are going down.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things Erik mentioned is there are some hurdles to get over in your mind. Like it is a psychological issue. And so I think probably one disadvantage is that it brings fear into a situation that's already pretty nerve-wracking, right? Like nobody needs more fear. But I do think that whole idea of, hey, wait, this nest egg that I've been collecting for years, am I really going to go throw it at this business? So, I mean, I definitely think that is a hurdle, right, for a lot of folks. I think that if you are unfamiliar, if you are a brand new business owner, if you haven't had several conversations with your CPA about different business structures and what they could mean, and the fact that they can all look relatively the same based on how your accountant is doing what they're doing, I think that if you are not familiar with that, sometimes the structure of a C corporation can feel daunting. It can feel overwhelming. There's more paperwork to get it formed, right? And the C corporation structure is a requirement with the ROBS program. So I would say that that's an area where you lose choice. And I don't think anybody likes to lose choice either, right? So if there's a disadvantage, maybe that's it. You don't get to decide what your corporate structure is. That's decided for you. The structure itself does not have to put your business at a disadvantage, but it is a choice you don't get to make, right? And I think that that's another one where it can not feel good, right? That's just sort of taken out of your hands.
Do that. Keep going.
So, well, I was just going to say, I think that again, for a lot of folks, when this is all brand new, to add something else in brand new that feels really radical is tough and, can take a little bit more time. But again, it doesn't mean that overall it puts your business at a disadvantage. It's just maybe tougher to sort of get your arms around what this really looks like and what it means.
I think one of the things too, like you mentioned it's a mindset shift. And then especially it's a mindset shift. And then you have a CPA that doesn't like C Corps for whatever reason, because they have more complexity to them. But a lot of things with more complexity because they have really cool strategies. And so there's strategies with C Corps that you can't do with other corps. And there are strategies that you can do with ROBS that you can't do with other things and with all the tax advantages. But if you have a CPA that's not familiar with that, or just doesn't like C Corps, or doesn't like that for whatever reason, because they are not used to that type of client, that can cause you to lose trust in the program. And I don't like that. So what do you suggest someone that really wants to get educated on that, and their CPA says, hey, Shirley, hey, Erik, my CPA, who I trust, says the ROBS program's stupid?
I say, let's get on a call together. I like a three-way conversation. Let's make sure that these are valid concerns and not just misunderstandings or misconceptions. I think that's the best way to do it, is just communicate through it, right? And make sure that everybody has the best data.
Perfect.
Yeah, I lived this literally at the end of last week. I had a client that had started the process of doing the ROBS with Benetrends, speaks to the CPA, calls me the next day and says, Erik, I want to unwind this. He says, I'll be better off being an LLC and going to get an SBA loan. I said, listen, let's do that. I'll unwind everything. There's nothing we do we can't back off and refund. No problem. But I just want to make sure it's what's best for you, and that you guys understand what the next steps would be. And we get on the call with the client and the accountant. And at the end of the call, the accountant was telling him to do the ROBs because, oh, wait a minute, it's not a fixed rate loan. Oh, wait, they're going to want this. Oh, wait, he's going to wait 8, 9, 10 plus weeks to close on this. And, oh, wait, that's right. If I do a C Corp, he's going to take out most of the money in profit, expenses, contributions, dividends. He's not going to pay corporate tax. So there's really no problem with the C Corp. Yeah, let's do that. And so, yeah, Shirley, just get educated. And listen, we all have our CPAs. We all love them. But just remember, they're people, and people would rather say no to something than admit they don't fully understand something. And I will tell you, if your CPA does your personal tax returns every year, chances are they're not a corporate or small business accountant. They usually have 80% of their clients that are that. That's great. Let them keep doing that. If you're a small business owner, franchisee, you want somebody that has other franchisees, other small business owners. My favorite line from an accountant was, if you've paid double tax in a C Corp, one of two things happen. One, you made way too much money, or two, you need to fire your accountant. And that was from the accountant. So I was just saying, hey, listen, I agree. So yeah, I would just say get educated.
Explain that to somebody that doesn't know what possible double taxation looks like.
I mean, in simplest terms, when people say double tax, which, by the way, and Shirley, I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Most people, when they bring it up to us, know the phrase double tax. They don't know what it means. They're just like, oh, I don't want to pay double tax. And then I ask them, well, what does that mean? They're like, I don't know. And really what people look at is, I'm going to pay tax on the money that I make. And then the corporation in a C corporation pays the corporate tax rate on certain funds that are remaining in the corporation on profits or certain areas side. So people view it as, I'm paying taxes individually and on the corporate side. But there's ways to minimize, if not eliminate, the need for the corporation to pay those taxes. And rather than getting into all those boring details, fortunately, we have a lot of people that do our job for us. Shirley, is, the president goes around the country every month. Hey, we've got all these big companies not paying their share in corporate taxes. Well, notice he never says they're breaking any laws. Why do you think these big companies, when you hear XYZ company buys back X amount of stock, or why do they pay big bonuses at the end of the year, or do X, Y, and Z? Because they're taking the money that's sitting in the profit and putting it back into expenditures, acquisitions, contributions back to retirement plan, zeroing out or minimizing the amount of corporate profit that ends up paying the double tax portion.
Shirley, anything to add to that?
I think that a lot of people just assume, I'm a W-2 employee, because that's what I am in a C corporation. I'm paying taxes when I get a paycheck. My company's paying taxes. Everything was taxed twice. And it's just not that simple. I think, so to Erik's point, it's just more about the difference between taxes you pay as an employee versus taxes the company pays based on its net profit, and all the deductions and strategies that your accountant can help you employ along the way. And I think the other thing is too, I know Erik does, we're networked with accountants across the country, right? So if your family guy who's been doing your personal taxes for the last 20 years isn't the right guy, that's okay. We can help make those connections too, because there are a lot of people out there with no dog in the fight in terms of how you fund your business, right? But with the knowledge and the expertise to sort of just help with that guidance.
Well, let's move on to a different topic. ROBs, we could spend a lot of time on ROBs, and I'll leave it at this. When you look at the entity structure of most large businesses, probably of most franchisors of any size are going to be C Corps. And there's a reason why some of these large corporations are C Corps. So more complexity, but complexity isn't necessarily a bad thing. All right. The good old Heloc. Shirley, why don't you take this one?
So home equity lines of credit have become increasingly popular over the last couple of years. I think some people have, noticed some gains in their equity in their real estate. I'm not sure. But it's a great option, honestly. It's not always a super easy option to combine with an SBA loan. if the home equity line of credit is the only place where we can come up with cash, it can be an option to combine with an SBA loan if we do have other cash and income and strengths to the application. So, it certainly has its different uses. They have great interest rates, right? They are true lines of credit versus being a term loan. So you're really making payments based on what you're using, oftentimes interest only, depending on exactly how the line is written. Because people have it, experienced as increases in the amount of equity that they have available. I've seen a lot of folks be able to fully fund a business with a home equity line of credit. Maybe they need 150,000. It's not super easy to get an SBA lender excited about $100,000 loan today.
It's the same paperwork, isn't it? It's the same paperwork.
100 or a million, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. So, I think that truly, while neither Erik or I get hands-on involved in a home equity line of credit, I think I can confidently say we're both bubbling that up to the surface for folks a lot, when it makes sense, when it could be a good opportunity for them.
All right, let's talk about the disadvantages. And then I'm going to come back to you, Shirley, with a question of who have you advised to do a Heloc? The meaning you're sending them somewhere else. You're not going to do business with them, but when do you advise them boy, you should do a Heloc? That's going to be next for you. Erik, what are the disadvantages of a Heloc?
Disadvantage-wise, I would say probably one of the biggest hurdles. Doesn't matter if you have $1 billion in equity in your home. If you don't have income, you're not getting one. The banks make their decision off of your debt to income ratio, and then what equity is available. So if my home is worth $1 million and I only have $100,000 left on my mortgage, I've got $900,000 in equity, but I was laid off last month, I ain't getting a dollar. And that person that might have that $70,000 a year job that has $500,000 in equity in their home, they're going to get a $300,000 line of credit. It's really that simple. You do not have an income coming in the door. You're really not getting a Heloc or some other forms of personal lines of credit. The other negative, it's borrowed funds at the end of the day. That's why Shirley and I talk about all the time, hey, if you can get a home equity line of credit for the same amount of money you need on the SBA loan, I would go the Heloc every day of the week and twice on Sunday. You're leveraging your home for borrowed funds. Do you want to do that at 7% on an SBA loan, or do you want to do it at 3 or 4% on a Heloc, which, to Shirley's point, it's interest rate, so you're really only paying interest on what you're using. As far as the other negatives, really it's the income, and just like anything else, that asset, if we happen to go through a housing reversal, I won't say the other words that are being floated around there on the news right now, it does create interesting scenarios. And fortunately, not many need to think that far back, because a lot of people had home equity lines of credit in 08 and 09, and how that happened and how that worked. I don't think we're ever going to go back there, but I think all would agree that some of the values of homes are a little inflated right now. But it's not a bad idea to leverage that and get into the business and start generating that income to return those funds back. But yeah, the negative is just really more of the finding the place to get them done, and the fact that really it's based off of your personal assets.
All right, Shirley, who should do a Heloc? Who's the last person that you looked at their situation and you're like, you should go do a Heloc?
So I've talked to a lot of people lately who are very, very liquid, to the tune of millions of dollars, which is awesome, right? We love it. But the SBA is going to come back and say, hey, Mr. $5 million investment portfolio, you don't need a government guaranteed loan. You're just too liquid for this program. So that person should all day long go look at a home equity line of credit, or a line of credit against their investment portfolio. There are other personal options that they can take advantage of. So in that situation, I bring it up a lot. Also, when the loan is under $150,000, oftentimes that will make sense just from a speed and efficiency and cost perspective, realistically. Now, to Erik's point, it has to be the right person. They do need outside income, right? So there are, different kind of variables that will factor in there. I think the person that I don't suggest it for is the person who needs exactly what they have available in a home equity line of credit, right? If we're going to leave them with no cushion to rely on and nothing to fall back on, I'm not going to suggest let's go fully fund your business with the only dollar you have left, right? So there's a time where it's right and where it isn't. But yeah, I mean, again, for people who have a lot of equity in real estate, if you're going to open one location and you're going to look for a $350,000 loan, an SBA lender is going to tie up your house anyway, right? So your real estate's on the line no matter what. Now it really does become about the numbers. What makes more sense from a fee and interest perspective?
It doesn't feel like your home is tagged. It's used as collateral. It doesn't feel like that because it's just a piece of paper versus in the bank account coming out where you can physically see it. But you can't just sell your house. If you want to sell it, you just can't do that without consequences for both of them, for a Heloc or if it's used as collateral. So let's take this a step further. Let's say, you're advising someone to get a Heloc just in general for liquidity as they grow their business and whatnot. The SBA is going to tag it, or, like what are some scenarios that you would say you should get a Heloc now versus a Heloc later? The example of that is I got a Heloc on my house because I knew I was going to look at getting an SBA loan. And I didn't want them to feel, because like, Erik said, you guys both said it, banks are businesses. And I didn't want them to be too tempted to take my home as collateral when there are other things that they could use as collateral, even though the home was the easiest thing for them to do. So I got a larger Heloc on it. So like back to you guys, when do you suggest someone gets a Heloc?
Not everybody is honestly the one thing that I would point out about that example. Not everybody has other assets that they could use instead. And so someone who is not you could potentially be shooting themselves in the foot by going and getting a big Heloc in advance of applying for an SBA loan if we now do not have an asset to provide as collateral. So I think that's where, Erik and I would probably both suggest, like, talk to us, talk to one of the funding consultants on our team. We need to know more about you and your situation to make the best recommendation there. Because again, that strategy could work really well for you, but it may not work so well for me simply because we have different financial situations. So that's probably the one thing I would throw out. I think it really will look different on an individual by individual basis.
Yeah. And also remember what the different stages are. You could go and get a $200,000 Heloc. Doesn't mean you have to start using it tomorrow. You might just have it available. Now, if you still have it, whether you've used a penny or not, typically the SBA lenders would like to see that closed because they don't want to be in the third position on the lien on the property. And even if you haven't used any of the Heloc money, whoever did the Heloc is likely in a second position lien on the property. So yeah, I mean, I know people will look at their values now and say, why wouldn't I do this now? As Shirley said, there gets to be a certain part where everybody is different. And sometimes the timing of these little things do have lasting impacts of, well, I went and leased the car first that I needed for the business, or leased the vehicle. Well, that changes this, or I paid this fee up front and then I'm going to use the SBA loan to pay myself back, or all these different things. So everybody is different. It just makes sense to look at all the options and how they work best with each other.
So this is a game. Like, there's things that you want the lender to know, and there's things that you don't want the lender to know. You don't know when you should have open and honest conversations. Like, here's everything. You don't go to, so working with somebody like you can have these conversations to best position yourselves for the different programs or for the different lenders. And that's what I think is nice, because you can say, I've got, $300,000 of available credit in my house where you could get a Heloc for $300,000 coming out of it, but you don't have any other collateral. You don't have rental properties. You don't have securities. You don't have anything else as collateral. So you could be shooting yourself in the foot if you go and take out that Heloc. It might mess up your SBA loan. So I think 100% agree. Every situation so individualized, and that's why it's important to have these types of conversations. And that's why it's extremely important to have a trusted person that you can talk to through some of these strategies, so you don't accidentally do the wrong thing. With accidentally doing the wrong thing, what are some of the things that you've seen in all types of loans that you're like, oh no, I cannot believe you just did this because it messed up the loan?
I think one big one is if we are in a brick and mortar situation and there's going to be any construction or build out that needs to happen, get your loan and get your specific lender lined up well in advance of beginning construction. If you start construction using your own money, it's going to be very difficult to get a bank excited about jumping in the middle of that, if at all now. So, I think especially for your brick and mortar situations, you want to make sure that you have your lender lined up early, even before executing your lease realistically, but absolutely before you start any build out or construction.
Yeah, that's a great point, Shirley, on two fronts. One, you can't say, hey, I went ahead and upfront paid these $200,000, but now I'm going to get the SBA loan as if I only put in $100. No, the bank says, you've already put this in. I'm not giving you money to pay off your personal debt. But the other part is when you're dealing with brick and mortar, and I know, Erik, you've talked about this a ton with your different groups, TI. When do you get TI?
Tenant improvement dollars, money back from the landlord is TI.
But when do you often get it?
After the bill, after you are leasing and all of the liens have been removed.
Yeah, I mean, essentially after it's built. After it's built. So if it's after it's built, who has to fund the build? You do, as long as with that SBA loan. So people go and say, oh, well, my project costs are this because a franchisor told them it's $500,000 with the assumption of what you're going to get back in TI and leasing equipment. But you can't submit your loan for what they're estimating it to be when it's all done with TI. You have to upfront that. And the amount of people I've met that you could be a good candidate for a $500,000 SBA loan, but you're not a good one for a $700,000. And if you're assuming $200,000 in TI and now all of a sudden things come back, that's one of the other big things just to realize with construction. And that's why it's always best to get in there early and really understand what those costs are.
Couple quick questions, quick answers. Do veterans get any special deals out there in terms of lending?
Today, no. The SBA does not in this moment have a special program for veterans. They could in the future, but I think what you see right now are a lot of companies repackaging average SBA programs, portraying them as if they are special for veterans simply in an effort to attract veteran candidates, but there are no special SBA programs today.
Good marketing.
Yes. Well, or I don't know if I call it good. I just call it marketing. But it's amazing. Hey, Erik, this company's offering this loan. Let me guess, it's a 10-year term, prime plus 2.75, and this rate. Yes, that's called an SBA loan. If there's anything I would say with veterans, it might increase the appetite of lenders to do a deal where maybe if it was a non-veteran business would have less of an appetite. Everybody wants to continue to have, but as far as changing the terms and conditions of a loan, likely not.
Common misconceptions of putting capital in or cash in. We kind of hit that, but biggest common misconception for percentage of down payment on the loan.
I think everybody assumes it will be 10%. It is very likely that it's going to be more like 20, sometimes 25, maybe 30. It really depends on order of operations, and it could look different from one franchisee to another.
Multiple loans at one time, Erik. What are some? What's the deal with that? Easy or hard or impossible or common?
In this market, the exception, not the rule. Banks fund one project at a time. Each location is its own project. And as we've talked about multiple times, banks are businesses. So it also depends on what type of owner you are. If I own 20 of another business and I'm going to go add 2 more of these, I might find a conventional lender, non-SBA, to do something. But if I'm buying my first business, the bank's going to say, okay, great. So not only do we want to see if this guy can be a girl or gal, could be a good business owner for this one, let's see if they can do it 2 times at the same time. So one loan at a time, the chances of going to get a lender to fund multiple locations at once is not going to be done through an SBA loan. And it really is going to be that you stumbled across the right bank and you found the right business and you've got the background to support it. But other than that, you're getting one loan for each location.
All right, one last question. I just thought about this one. I wish I could ask you separately where you couldn't see each other's answers. But what do you suggest? Somebody that's interested in working on a loan, do they reach out to FranFund and Benetrends, or FranFund or Benetrends?
I think one or the other ultimately makes the most sense. And we love people, right? So you're welcome to reach out to both of us. But as you can tell, like we're pretty much on the same page, right? I think we both are pretty knowledgeable about what's going on, and you don't find us contradicting each other often. So I mean, while you're more than welcome to reach out to both, one or the other will probably get it done for you.
Yeah, that, and I would say regardless of Benetrends or FranFund, reach out to whoever gives you the best chance of getting the most accurate information. So if I'm working with a franchise, a good franchise will say, hey, by the way, we have this lending relationship or this funding partner, and they already know our deal. They already have banks that are lined up with it. So whether it's Shirley, myself, or anyone else, just go to where there's accurate information. And if you don't go there, remember, not everybody, remember, these are all businesses. So when a bank says to you they're not going to do your loan, it might just not fit their appetite. It might has nothing to do with the business. But I would go to places that the first call feels educational, not promotional.
Guys, fierce competitors, very good friends. Yeah, you can tell how fierce they are, giving you such great advice. Like, I love that. That's why I appreciate you both. You're not just trying to get business out there. You are helping the franchise community. Thanks again to both of you for coming on the Franchise Secrets podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.